Trying to be everywhere, anytime someone or some group asked. That's what we did the previous 3 years after getting the School Climate Bill of Rights in LA Unified adopted, which drew national, statewide, region-wide attention. It was surreal, and at times it felt discombobulated. Were we really making progress? Because although LA Unified suspensions had dropped over 90% since we started working to end the school-to-prison pipeline, Black students were still the ones suspended disproportionately. New schools had opened up in South LA, and there were no more year-round schools, which also meant fewer Black students at each school. It didn't matter how low of a percentage they were of enrollment. They were still 50% of the suspensions. And LA Unified had even managed to frame high suspension rates as a negative outcome. So schools were trying not to have lots of suspensions. But if only 6 kids were suspended in a school year, chances were that 3 of them were Black, be it the same kid 3 times or 3 different kids. All of this coincided with the entire world grappling with the value of Black life, whether Black lives mattered, and the dehumanizing backlash to asserting and demanding that they do. The lesson to be learned? That our own movement's victories also revealed contradictions, limitations, and often a rapid retreat to the comfort zone of changing smaller things instead of uprooting practices that are rooted in white supremacy. The success in bringing down suspension rates was diluting the ever-present need to fully decriminalize our school environments. So from the summer of 2016 through the spring of 2019, we geared up to bring attention to all of the unfinished business. We had already decided to do another comprehensive shadow report to coincide with the 10th anniversary of LA Unified's adoption of SWP by S, which is going to be in 2017. But this time, we wanted to emphasize how little had changed for Black and Brown parents and the narratives surrounding their capacities as parents. More people's hearts were warming to the idea of keeping Black and Brown kids in schools as much as possible. No one was seeing the picture intergenerationally, however, that many parents had been pushed out as young people or had spent their entire adult lives criminalized for not having resources and needing the public safety net. The framework of criminalizing poverty started first with criminalizing parents as heads of households. And when they send their children to school with less than, and then their children are suspended, compassion and redemption are often only reserved for the children. Given our origin story, this contradiction motivated us at CADRE to level up our narrative strategy. We did this shadow report differently. We went beyond having parents analyze the data as the only breakthrough. We posed the question, how can you love the kids but hate the parents? We did this to bring to light that we cannot end the school-to-prison pipeline without humanizing the families and communities that Black and Brown children are a part of. That we cannot separate them, cause division among them, or program children to prefer the school and reject the parents. We countered with South LA parent love. There is no data, really, about the quality of parent engagement at schools. We had to ask for more sign-in sheets in our public records request. We spent more time looking at whether parents were really involved in their school site-based discipline teams. It wasn't hard to predict what the data said, and what our recommendations would have to be. Schools must embrace Black and Brown parents, especially the most marginalized ones, as full participants in transforming school climates. And in order to do so, they would have to humanize parents to truly sit at the table with them authentically. Full parent participation is the missing element and the game changer. The picture that no one really sees in their heads, and so we had to paint it for them. On the heels of our shadow report release, we deliberated with our core parent leaders, staff, and board to ultimately decide to join as an organizational plaintiff on a landmark lawsuit filed in December 2017, asserting that the state of California had failed to provide a group of students at several schools, 2 in South LA and 2 in Stockton, their constitutional right to an education by not ensuring literacy attainment, despite declaring a literacy crisis 5 years prior. While this was a new strategy for us, it was actually a throwback to the earliest days of our work. Numerous doorstep conversations in the early 2000s were with parents talking about their children disconnected from language arts or math instruction, not being at grade level, and how many times this impacted classroom behavior that then led to classroom removals and often suspensions. The lawsuit was the beginning of a 2-year journey and adventure of learning the limited opportunities and specific challenges of securing educational rights for Black and brown children through litigation. We did it for our parents, who believed that this lawsuit would not only validate the many invisible ways in which students were being pushed out, but also ways that they had been pushed out, creating an intergenerational literacy crisis. With the roots of the literacy crisis inextricably linked to this country's history of making it illegal and punishable for enslaved Black folks and indentured Black and brown workers to read or write, we felt we had to pursue this as another dimension of ending the school-to-prison pipeline. Finding kindred spirits along CADRE's journey has been invaluable to our organizational resilience and fortitude. We would not have made it the first 15 years without our friends at Justice Matters, Partners for Dignity and Rights, and the National Dignity in Schools campaign. They saw the values and humanity we were organizing parents with. They saw the long game that we were trying to play. And over the last 5 years, without allies, we would not have been able to take our statewide movement building to the next level, to foster solidarity across regions, to deliberately ensure that the victories in Los Angeles and the Bay Area did not overshadow the deep work that still had to be done in more conservative regions of California, which were quickly becoming Black and brown majorities as families were gentrified and pushed out of LA and the Bay Area. Starting in 2012, we had begun to cultivate a statewide core group of organizations. We built solidarity among us and committed to principles of engagement and a movement-building blueprint. In 2017, CADRE co-founded and co-launched Dignity in Schools Campaign California. In short order, we were laying the groundwork for a conscious, statewide alliance to end the school-to-prison pipeline and pulling each other towards a more radical North Star of eliminating law enforcement and its ideology from schools. We centered Black-led organizing as our guide, and we encircled the Black Organizing Project's years-long campaign to eliminate school police in Oakland. We encircled it with Black-brown solidarity across 5 regions. In the Central Valley, Central Coast, and Inland Valley, our allies began building collective tables around ending the school-to-prison pipeline and advancing their political and leadership development in their own unique ways, but braided together through and as DSC California. We shared data, built data analysis capacity across the regions, shared successful strategies in LA and the Bay Area with the 3 other regions, which had had far less investment in grassroots organizing infrastructure. Our model brought new resources to these regions, but most importantly, we were beginning to move as if on a string with one another, taking on the same difficult political discussions, piercing organizational egos, centering the potential of further developing the parents and youth we were all organizing in innovative cross-regional ways. For CADRE, DSC California became an extension of us, a way to leverage everything we had learned in South LA to build something even bigger and something sustainable, because we had found kindred spirits that invested in transparent, conscious, deliberative leadership and political development, that believed in going slower in order to aim more radically, more quickly, later. Kindred spirits that were committed to getting behind each region's power to shift the narrative around police and schools. After a decade plus of policy victory after policy victory, growing influence, and the emergence as a thought leader, narrative shifter, and movement builder, there usually comes a point in the life cycle of a social justice organization where you hit a crossroads. Sometimes it is caused by the opposition finally responding with backlash. Sometimes it is caused by not having a new goal or a loss of resources. Thankfully, from our origin story years ago, CADRE's North Star always had a long trajectory. It was always beyond what was immediately practical. Ending the school-to-prison pipeline truly implies a complete reorientation, reorganization, and repurposing of education, of school campuses, of stakeholders' roles. CADRE was at a crossroads nevertheless. Because we definitely could have milked our victories and stayed in a comfort zone of participating in everything we were invited to, of just monitoring implementation and continuing to show up on panels at conferences. But that is not what organizing is. That is not what movement building is, and it certainly would not have been sustainable. We instead created our own sense of urgency to ask ourselves the hard questions. Where did we want to be in 2025? Were we prepared for the inevitable backlash narrative? the narrative that would say that SWP/S or restorative justice did not do enough or did not work. How were we going to sustain the organization if donors and the public moved on from this issue? Did we need to expand our geographical focus? Could we engage other sectors around the struggle for racial justice in education, around parent-led struggles? We began a strategic planning process so that we could answer these hard questions before we were forced to do so by unforeseen circumstances. To do otherwise would have been to risk staying stagnant. Tune in to our next and final video chronicling 2019 to 2022, an arc of time that has had the entire globe grappling collectively with what it truly means to exist, to be safe, to be healthy, to build for the future. We'll share how CADRE fared through the pandemic and how we are facing what's on the horizon.